Welcome, boys and girls. Christine here with a discussion about Bretonia in Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires. What Bretonia really is a Warhammer 1 race that's never made the transition properly from back then, similar to Norska. To be sure, Bretonia is a better race than Norska, far better race. The situation with hero recruitment, hero capacity situation, units, economy, growth, etc. is a much better race than Norska. It doesn't have those kind of annoyances, though it does have some fairly substantial issues as well. So let's talk about those issues and what I think Creative Assembly could do with respect to them. So the first issue has to do with units. You don't have supply lines as Bretonia, so you can technically maintain as many armies as you want, though those armies might only have a lord in them. Because Bretonia has two significant limitations. Those limitations were not so much of an issue back in the days of Warhammer 1 or Warhammer 2, but they certainly are an issue in Warhammer 3, because of the way supply lines changed. So you have the peasant economy, and then you have the knight vows, which, yes, can be fairly annoying to unlock to an extent. But let's talk about the peasant economy. The peasant economy is largely dictated by how many settlements you own. The more settlements you own, the more peasants you have to your economy. Sounds great. Except early on in a Bretonia campaign, this will be a severely limiting factor in how many troops you can have. So just because you can have a lot of armies due to the lack of supply lines doesn't mean you can really have a lot of armies, because you will be paying quite a substantial price from an economic standpoint with your peasant economy. So it's a system that early on is punishing, and later on it's a nothing system. Like over here, turn 55, I am at 87 peasants. And mind you, while I did get the unification of Bretonia, I haven't gotten something like water pumps. I chose in this campaign to focus on the Chivalry Code and the Decrees of Bretonia. We'll talk about those in just a moment. But fundamentally, it isn't a great system to be dealing with in a Bretonian campaign. With the vows, getting the knight's vow is fairly simple, early on at least. You just gotta rank a lord 5 times. Now there's a problem with this, of course, in that later on in a campaign, like early on when you're recruiting level 1 lords, it's not really an issue, but later on when you get various benefits to lord recruitment, it becomes an issue. Though of course later on you might be able to get chivalry to such a level that you don't care about the knight's vow. Though it does take quite a fair amount of chivalry, over 4,000, in order to have your lords unlocked with the knight's vow. But it is a point. There's various ways of increasing lord recruit rank, and the higher your lord, the harder it's going to be to unlock that knight's vow until you get to a chivalry level. But the questing vow is really the annoyance, especially long term. Early on might be not so much of a problem, because you might have a few lords, or you have a lot of lords, but you're keeping them close together, so you just have to find a naval battle. But even then, it can be an issue, because, for instance, in this campaign, I've sent 2 armies over here for Enchantress and one of my generals, and he didn't get the questing vow in this entire campaign. And yes, I did send them via the sea. I did even fight battles via the sea, though I just never got the opportunity. So you have an annoying system that requires you to take extra steps, or you ignore it and just pay the price in terms of upkeep, and it is a substantial upkeep. I might as well have a stack of freaking thunder barges in this army for the cost that these Grail Knights are requiring me. Grail Knights, questing Knights, all that kind of stuff. So it is absolutely a frustration of a system to deal with. It's also not especially great with heroes, because at least lords can eventually unlock questing vows by default, but heroes can't. So with heroes, you're always going to have to go through this, managing of heroes in a campaign. It doesn't matter, obviously, as much as with the vows, but as with lords in terms of the vows, because it's not affecting your upkeep. But it's still something that you care about, like Frown of Protection gives you growth, Frown of Wisdom gives you cooldown to spells, Frown of Virtue, gives you immortality, though you do also get that rank 20. But still, just not a really great system to be dealing with during the course of a campaign, because, yeah, you'll end up with quite a few of these situations. You just get to a point where you just don't care, because your economy can support it. So At best, it is a system you ignore. At worst, it is a system that requires you to take those extra steps in playing your campaign in such a way that you're maximizing your vow output as opposed to really enjoying the campaign the way you should be. So that is not really a great system, and I think that Creative Assembly needs to change that system with respect to the vows. Now, technically, you can argue, well, Chivalry gives you a significant advantage in terms of unlocking these vows. Again, it only applies to Lords and Heroes, but the problem with Chivalry, and that's really the third issue beyond Peasant economy and the vows, the problem with Chivalry is, one, you need to get to 10,000 Chivalry to win your campaign, and getting to 10,000 Chivalry is a very slow process. It takes a while to get the Chivalry to a reasonable level, and even at this point of turn 55, I'm only like earning 355 Chivalry per turn. And the only reason I'm earning 355 is because I'm raising settlements left and right. Like, one of the things that I've been doing for the last few dozen turns is actually just going against settlements and raising them to the ground. And you're incentivized to do that because every settlement you raise gives you 50 Chivalry. So we're basically in the same situation as Norska, and this is not even a joke. In the sense that when Norska, let me explain. When Norska, you have a dynamic in a campaign, when you're playing as them, to sack a settlement, raise a settlement, and then occupy the settlement. That is the best way to play a Norskan campaign. Yes, it is as frustrating as it sounds. It is the same dynamic in a Bretonian campaign. Why is it the same dynamic in Bretonian campaign? Well, the reason, I'm not sure if I have the trait on this specific lord, I guess I don't, but maybe the Fey Enchantress has it, no she doesn't, I do have it on Lewin. So you get the trait over here that gives you the ability, Destroyer, to get 50% income from sacking settlements. That is a significant economic advantage. Yes, it affects control. Yes, it does cost you a bit of Chivalry. But you can sack settlements, then raise them next turn, and actually get more Chivalry as a result of that. It is worth doing. It will give you a lot of... At least it's worth doing early on in a campaign. But as you can understand, long-term in a campaign, it's not smart to do it. Because if you have all your lords losing Chivalry per turn, it's obviously going to slow down your entire campaign progress. But it is that level of frustration. You don't want to ransom troops, like you have two post-battle options, usually kill everyone or ransom them. And almost always you never want to ransom them because that's going to give you a negative trait that you don't want. Because the negative trait of Destroyer is actually a significant benefit because it obviously gives you that kind of Chivalry. Because even though it costs Chivalry, it gives you that kind of economic benefit. The trait for ransoming people... not so great. So Bretonia has the capability of earning a lot of money, but it does have severe limitations as well. Your regular economy has the limitations of the peasant. Your sacking and looting income or post-battle loot has the limitation of, costing you Chivalry. And typically speaking, I would say that paying the Chivalry cost is worth it in a campaign almost always, but it will slow down how fast you're able to do the campaign. Which is not really a great system. Like, it's a system like, you should do this, but then it's like, you're going to spend potentially double the time playing a campaign. The real problem with Chivalry is that the rewards for low level of Chivalry are just flat not worth it. The Green Knight is not great. The leadership benefit can be decent enough, sure, for peasants, though you kind of don't care about peasants by the time you can get, like, Chivalry to, over 2,000, 4,000. Like, you may always just like, oh, I'll just recruit ogre mercenaries or allied recruitment as opposed to recruiting peasant. Like, I should really replace these peasant bowmen and these battle pilgrims in this army and just get some ogres, some ogre mercenaries or allied recruitment over here. Just gives you an idea. Which, incidentally, is why Rapunzel is the best legendary lord of Bretonia, because she starts with a couple of ogres next to her. She can always recruit ogre mercenaries for her army to have line holders. It is a strategy. That is available in a campaign. But yeah, the problem with Chivalry is that you earn very damn little of it. You are supposed to have all kinds of different benefits. So there is research that gives you Chivalry and also Confederation. But then there's research like the Decrees of Bretonia that give you things like, Chivalry for every victory against Norska, Chivalry against victory against Greenskin, Chivalry against Chaos. However, that kind of level of chivalry ends up not being all that great. Like over here, I got 106 chivalry from vows, and I got 100 from just raising 2 settlements. Essentially, this research is completely pointless, and you should never bother with it, to be quite blunt. Well, okay, the only reason you really bother with this stuff is not because of the chivalry benefit. You bother with it because of the kinds of other benefits that you get against the Hellenes fact, like immune to barren wasteland attrition, snow attrition, that kind of stuff, right? Or casualties to attrition suffered from cast undivided corruption and cast waste attrition. And that is the only reason you should actually bother with these decrees in a campaign. So your ways of naturally earning chivalry, be it for battles or traits or anything like that, are just not great. Yeah, like even from the traits, I'm only earning 115. So you're incentivized to raise elements to the ground, which is not a great dynamic. And you're not doing this, by the way, because you care about the benefits. But by the time, like, everything over here that you get, okay, Lord Recruit rank, pretty useful, to be sure. The only thing you really care about over here would be, like, the 8,000 plus chivalry benefit. But by that point, you've long since won your campaign and you're just grinding along in a Bretonian campaign. So not really a great situation. Like, this is the only tier that's actually worth it, but getting to it is such a damn pain to actually unlock in a Bretonian campaign. One could argue about the Knight's Vow, but then you have to do the questing vow, so not really all that great either. With respect to that, because it's really not the Knight's Vow that's the problem, it's the questing vow that's the problem. Like, the Grail Vow and the Knight's Vow, fairly easy to unlock. Like, one just requires you to kill 5 lords, one requires you to rank up 5 times. Those are pretty easy. Just annoying to have to keep track of everything, but pretty easy. The questing vow is either requiring a siege battle in desert or jungle, Alberic Rapans, or requiring you to win a battle at sea, or requiring you to, you know, go out of your way to do certain things. Like over here, like you can see, defeat a legendary lord of the Ogre Kingdoms, beastmen, greenskins, or dark elves. Have fun with that one. It is not exactly a great experience to be dealing with in a Bretonian campaign. Having to track of that, having to track vows on heroes and lords, and keep in mind, like, you could probably just ignore heroes, sure, but I think the best way to do it is like just get a mod that unlocks vows automatically once your heroes and lords reach a certain level. So that means that as you gain those campaign benefits for hero and lord recruit rank, you will actually just unlock automatically those vows without having to worry about it. That, by the way, what the AI does. If you think the AI is interacting with the system, they are not. Instead, they're just using cheats. And it just removes the hassle that you have to deal with as a player. I also think the peasant economy needs to work better, because right now, it doesn't really matter. Even early on, what you're going to do is like, oh, I have a limitation on how many peasants I can have. Okay, I'll either not recruit peasants and just get like 10 lords roaming around. You can only bring 4 in a battle. Bring 4, recruit a bunch of knights for them, and just sack settlements for a significant amount of income. And later on, you just don't give a damn whatsoever in your Bretonian campaign. Peasants are so worthless that Skaven slaves are literally better to recruit, even when they're free. Like, I'm not joking. Like, it's kind of hilarious. Bretonia can recruit as many units per turn from a settlement as Skaven. But if you're playing a Skaven campaign, you know, recruiting a bunch of Skaven slaves just to have armies to throw at the enemy would actually be worth it. Bretonia campaign, it's not worth it whatsoever. People can talk about the scalability of Bretonia because of the blacksmiths. Over here, Snitch did something to my settlement, one of his actions that screwed me over. But people can talk about like, oh, Bretonia doesn't have to care, or Bretonia can get a bunch of really powerful units because they can get +2 armor for all armies. Okay, you need tier 4. By the time you get to tier 4, you're already in the late game, and you need to get, 5 at least to be worthwhile. 5 provincial capitals where you're spending this. The issue that gets created with this is that Bretonia also requires multiple buildings for different things. Like, don't get me wrong, armories are worth getting, but think of it. If you're playing a Bretonian campaign, what is your priority in settlements, for the most part? Let's assume you don't have a landmark, right? Usually you'll have some resource or landmark to deal with. What is your priority? Well, you don't bother with a barracks chain because it's worthless. Like, if you want foot squires, you're better off going for Bordello in a campaign because it gives you the Shrine of Manon, which allows you to recruit foot squires at tier 3, so you don't bother with the building chain. But you focus on the cavalry chain because you need that paladin hero capacity primarily, and obviously you want to recruit the higher tier units. The second thing you get is you want to get the Grail Chapel, so that's already 2 buildings, right? Look at how many buildings are. So 2 of these building slots are already occupying at tier 4. That's not counting landmarks, that's not counting any kind of resource building, right? Or a port. But then you also have 2 other buildings with the fields chain, or the industry chain if you want to, with the tailors. And then you need an extra building in each settlement with the water wheel. This is how Kislev used to work with the, similar situation, then they changed it province-wide. I think, yes, the water wheel should be something you only need 1 per province to unlock these buildings. That would vastly improve the Bretonian campaign situation and would actually give you more choices. But point is, you're losing something in order to get these armories. Generally speaking, it's not worth losing hero capacity, to be sure, but you're looking at 2 free buildings if you're considering the army, 5 if you're considering the landed estate with the water wheel. That is a lot of building slots on that Bretonia has to use in a campaign. So that is not a great dynamic. I think that it would certainly help with the water wheel, but I also think it would just flat out help if armories didn't work like this, because it's not really a great system in a campaign. I would just flat out remove the armory chain, or I would merge these buildings with the siege chain. I would just put these effects together. Remove the armor when defending, melee defense when defending. Just put these effects together in a similar building over here and allow you to recruit Blessed Field Trebuchets at tier 4. Now, another thing to point out with regards to Bretonia before we talk about unit recruitment, because yes, that is an issue, we got to talk about the research tree. The way confederations work in a Bretonian campaign, or at least if you're not playing Rapans, is you need to get the Chivalry code, and then you need to get the research unlocked for all of these factions to even be able to confederate them. Now, you can confederate them either for chivalry or for money. Never go for chivalry. It's already a slow enough process. Paying chivalry to recruit to confederate a faction. But the problem is, if a faction is dead, if a faction is alive, you get an event like either paying chivalry or paying money or not confederating. You get a bit of chivalry if the faction is still alive. The problem is, Artois, Paravon, all of these factions effectively, with the exception of Carcassonne and Bordello, are factions that are always going to be wiped out. So you complete the research and you get nothing from that process. No event to even get the Legendary Lord if they've been wiped out. Consider the Castle of Confederation, at least get the Legendary, or the Dwarf Confederation with Legendary Lords. You at least get the Lord, right, through that Confederation mechanic. You don't even get that. So for instance, over here I quote-unquote confederate Albrecht, but because he got gotten wiped out, I got nothing. And the only option I have over here with Albrecht would be to send an army over there to a starring settlement and spark a rebellion over there, which is harder than you might think, right? So for instance, because Bretonia can have a good level of control, so it's a tricky affair. Over here, I've been trying to spark a rebellion with Rapans for a while over right here. It kind of hasn't worked out, suffice to say. Actually, I did cause a rebellion, and then it was Tegan's errantry that rebelled, so I'm just trying desperately to get Rapans to rebel over here so I can actually sell her, so I can actually try and get her as a Legendary Lord. I guess I should just flat out ignore it at this point. But it does give you an idea of how broken the Confederation is. The decrees of Bretonia, the combat benefits are nice, but yeah, just not a great situation. You get all kinds of diplomatic benefits, but really, what you want to usually get, and what I'd recommend you usually get, is you get the research tree that's over here, like water pumps, improved construction, all these kind of things. That is what you want, realistically, in a Bretonian campaign. So you have a fairly one-dimensional research tree. It's eventually getting unification of Bretonia is worth it, but it's just better to play Rapans where she doesn't have to deal with this nonsense in her campaign. So Yeah, the research tree needs a complete overhaul. Then we got to talk about unit recruitment tiers. So I did my tier list on Bretonia. And Bretonia is kind of unique in the sense like the better units are actually worth recruiting, like Royal Guardians, Royal Hippogriff, Royal Pegasus, all that kind of stuff. The problem is, you look at the tier requirements of units, they're pretty annoying. Like, yes, the units are really good, but requiring tier 4 to get basic Pegasus Knights, like I would put Pegasus Knights as a tier 3, even tier 2 unit, from my perspective. Like, I think Yeomen should just be recruited from any settlement. I think Knights Errant should be a tier 1 unit. I think Knights of the Realm should be tier 2. Questing Knights, maybe tier 3, but also put Pegasus Knights as tier 3, maybe. But you do end up having this kind of level of annoyance with regards to the unit tiers. Now, one could argue that Bretonia has one of the best growths in the entire game. That is true. Bretonia per settlement has plus 60 growth at tier 3. That is one of the highest levels of growth of any faction in the game. It is on par with Greenskins. In fact, you might end up surpassing Greenskins in terms of growth. Here's the issue though. That is great unless you're playing Bretonia in Bretonia. Why is that? Well, because Bretonia as a region of the game is made up of 2 region provinces. So all that fancy growth they get from provincial capitals and minor settlements is actually, a lot of it is wasted because of the situation you have with respect to settlements. So I'm guessing the developers who handled this realized that Bretonia needed higher growth to compete with other races because their growth in their actual settlements is limited by the way that Bretonia is designed as a region. Actually, almost every faction suffers from being in parts of the campaign map where they only have 2 region provinces, or in the case of Kislev, having those special cities with only 1 region in it. So that is a significant issue that you have to deal with in a lot of campaigns, and I think that's just one of the severe issues that growth in general has as a system in Warhammer 3. It makes Bretonia not really that appealing for almost anyone to deal with in a campaign. Funnily enough, the exception is someone like Karl Franz or Chaos Dwarves. Karl Franz, because he literally gets growth points for free, or quote-unquote free, through prestige in his campaign, so you can bypass the limitation on growth in settlements. But Bretonia's settlement situation and their unit recruitment situation, that is something that should be improved. Because you look at Knights Errant, right? You look at a unit like Knights Errant, in virtually every way, they're worse than Empire Knights, with the exception of having the Lance ability. In fact, like, Knights of the Realm can give Empire Knights a run for their money in a lot of ways. Oh, they don't have an anti-large. Okay. The point is, they're both shock cavalry. It's not how good they are against other cav, because that's usually what the anti-large bonus is on cav. It's not really a benefit against monsters or single entities. It's a benefit against other fast-moving large units. That's the anti-large benefit. So yeah, Knights of the Realm are better in that role. They're better as shock cavalry than Empire Knights, but they're worse in terms of survivability. Don't even get me started on how Reichsguard just trash so many units that Bretonia has, or Demigryphs are comparable to Grail Knights. And they're also far cheaper in a campaign to recruit. Those are the kind of fundamental issues. Effectively, almost everything you can think about to Bretonia is kind of broken in some way or another, or in the best case scenario, it's just a lot of hassle. The Chivalry, the vows, the peasant economy, they work. They won't make a campaign impossible or really slow, but it's a lot of things to manage for no real gain. And I think that those are the kind of things Creative Assembly should deal with. Costin, signing out. Stay tuned for more.